How is the GDP deflator different from other inflation measures? Have you ever wondered how different measures of inflation can tell us various stories about the economy? One such measure is the gross domestic product deflator, often called the GDP deflator. Let's break down how it stands apart from other inflation measures, like the consumer price index. The GDP deflator is unique because it looks at price changes for all goods and services produced within a country. This includes everything from consumer goods to government services and exports, but it does not consider imports. In contrast, the consumer price index focuses only on a fixed basket of goods and services that typical consumers buy, which includes imported items. When we calculate the GDP deflator, we take the nominal gross domestic product, which is the total value of all goods and services at current prices, and divide it by the real gross domestic product, which is the total value at constant prices from a base year. This calculation helps us see how much of the change in nominal gross domestic product is due to price changes, rather than changes in the quantity produced. Another key difference lies in how these measures adapt to changes in the economy. The GDP deflator uses a flexible basket of goods that changes with the economy's production. This means it can capture shifts in what is produced and consumed over time. On the other hand, the consumer price index uses a fixed basket based on what consumers typically purchase, which may not reflect current consumption patterns as accurately. Let's look at some specific distinctions. The GDP deflator covers all domestically produced goods and services, while the consumer price index is limited to consumer goods and services bought by households, including imports. This broader coverage makes the GDP deflator a more comprehensive measure of inflation affecting the entire economy. The purpose of these two measures also differs. The GDP deflator helps convert nominal gross domestic product into real gross domestic product, allowing us to separate inflation effects from real growth. The consumer price index, however, is mainly used to measure the cost of living and inflation as experienced by consumers. In terms of calculation methods, the GDP deflator employs a chain-weighted Fisher-Ideal index, which accounts for changing quantities and prices. The consumer price index typically uses a Laspers index, which keeps the basket fixed. In practical terms, the GDP deflator provides a broad overview of inflation that is useful for macroeconomic analysis and policy decisions. However, since it covers all goods and services, it may not accurately reflect the inflation experience of average consumers. This is why the consumer price index remains important for understanding consumer price inflation. So, when you think about inflation measures, remember that the GDP deflator offers a wide-angle view of price changes in the economy, while the consumer price index focuses on the specific experiences of consumers. Each measure has its role, helping us understand the economic landscape in different ways.